Good afternoon and welcome to the October meeting for the Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority for Harrisburg. Elaine Barber is unable to attend the meeting this afternoon. All other board members are present as well as our ex officio members. Next on the agenda is the approval of minutes, which I hope everyone has had a chance to review. If so, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes for our monthly meeting on September 26th.
So moved.
Second, any other discussion, corrections? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'll defer my comments to our conversation of the city's, or I'll move into conversations about the city's 5-year financial plan. And so you all know and all received the revised submission dated October 12th, 2023, which was to be provided on time with our extension. And today we'll discuss our reactions and formulate our response. We have two options: approve or disapprove with explanations and requests for changes. If we approve the plan, it will stand as submitted until the new plan is submitted in 2024, which, as you know, the date is August 31st. If we disapprove, the city will have 15 days to respond. And then likewise, the ICA will have 15 days to respond to their revisions. This continues as until a resolution is reached. I believe this is true because they actually withdrew their submission. So that means, in my opinion, the 30-day clock started again. So that anyone was wondering where that went. And as we know, the controller for the city of Harrisburg did render his opinion by letter on September 18th. We are very grateful for his office's thorough consideration and explanation of the reaction. The letter has been shared with members of the ICA board and members of the administration. In summary, the controller offers that he believes the projections are too optimistic, and if they're not scaled back, the numbers should be monitored very closely. According to the plan, in our review, the ICA shall determine whether, and this is verbatim, the financial plan projects balanced budgets based on prudent and reasonable and appropriate assumptions as described for each year of the plan. 2, the proposed operating budget and capital budget are consistent with the proposed financial plan. And so in our discussion, because everyone was nice enough to share their reactions, I propose that we order our discussion in the following 5 chunks. Reaction to the assumptions as presented and how the general fund unfolds over the following 5 years in the plan. Reaction to the assumptions as presented to the NSF, the Neighborhood Services Fund, and how they play out over 5 years. Discussion of the need for final and robust economic development plan. 4, incorporation of timelines for Act 47 exit status and the establishment of the OPEB trust, which we know has to be completed before the city can exit Act 47. And then a discussion of other important items, example being the Broad Street market, and perhaps how we encourage the city to take this as a pivotal time to really have a true impact on the city. So I open it for discussion.
I'll be happy to start on the side of the table.
Thank you, Ralph.
The first discussion, Madam Chair, that you asked about was opinion on the assumptions that are used. I think the first thing I would say is that I thought it would ended up a good step for the city to resubmit immediately rather than having us to go through the old plan. I think due to the fact that more updated numbers and economic data was incorporated, I felt like the projections, I think they were pretty good, to be honest, in the first draft, but I think right now the assumptions used and the explanation of the assumptions, in my opinion, is reasonably appropriate. So I think as a result, I think that based on today's information, the projections and how they flow through revenues and expense, I think do a good job of illustrating current status as well as the impact of current policies and programs on city's finances over the next 5 years. that said, obviously, this plan is updated on an annual basis for a specific reason, which is that circumstances change, things don't necessarily play out the way they have in the past, and macroeconomic factors obviously come into play. So that's my comment on the review. And I do think, as with that said, I think there are a couple concerns with the assumptions and they're plugged in and used. And I think the primary one relates to the general fund balance, and it has to do with the deployment of general fund dollars, a lot of them in 2024. And there's some reimbursements that don't occur until 2025. And as a result, fund balance falls below the policy threshold level as of year end for 2024, as shown in the plan. And again, compliments to the city for identifying this. I think that will be a great tool for them to identify and manage the cash balance in the general fund as they embark on some of these important projects for the long term of the city, including the ARP funding and the RACP project for the stadium renovation. So I did note those comments and submit them. So I'm sure our colleagues at the city will, probably obviously they saw that bottom line in 2024 before we did, since they prepared and shipped it off to us. So I'm sure that our colleagues' heads are in the same place. Would you like me to turn it back over to you, or go through the other points?
I think maybe if there's anyone else that has anything on the general fund, then we'll just make it also easier for Jeffrey to capture for the minutes. Topic by topic. I mean, I certainly agree with everything you said, Ralph, and the 7% is alarming, and I think it is. It's sort of what stuck, or what perhaps if we were prescient, we were thinking about. We're a little hesitant about paying off all of the MBAC debt so quickly, because we had sort of said maybe wait and see how you're spending the money and whether you're going to find yourself in this kind of position, because that was the 5% debt that we were carrying, and now we have no access to debt. That if something happens, it could put the city in a precarious position. But I know that Rita's obviously aware of this, and will try and stagger any expenses that she can, so to minimize the outflow and maximize the inflow. Rita, you should feel free to speak up as well. You don't have to sit here and just listen to them.
I would certainly prefer, if possible, to respond if needed.
Yeah.
And I have to kind of keep my policy perspective, in support of the administration.
Well, then we can move on to neighborhood services fund. Someone wants to speak to that.
I have my comments from the NSF as well. I think there's two comments. One, again, compliment to administration. I think that the attention on out years on the plan that we raised earlier in the year, I think that's coming to fruit here as the administration identifies the revenue and expense impacts of the operations fund. And there's some notes in the proposed plan regarding how the revenues and expenses are balanced, including the third-party services to the outside municipalities, as well as the current billing rates. So I think that's great, and as you can see in the result, the fund does more or less show balanced budgets in the out years. That's a huge step from where we were at just a short time ago. Always looking for critiques towards striving towards perfection, and I think there is one critique I would like to reiterate that's been a constant one, which has to do with the administrative fee that the city allocates from the NSF into the general fund. That administrative fee was discontinued, and the purpose was to conserve cash in the neighborhood services fund balance. And the problem with that as an accounting policy is that implicitly means that the general fund is subsidizing some of the administrative costs of the neighborhood services fund. Neighborhood services fund is ratepayers, and the general fund is taxpayers. And as you know, they're not quite the same. The taxpayers sometimes, the general fund services, as we know, there's a bit of a mismatch between the amount of services that are required and sources of revenue, which the nonprofits and governmental property owners are exempt from paying significant portions of tax on their properties in the city, when that's not true for utilities such as trash. So I think that implicit subsidy from the general fund is something that, as a matter of policy, I would continue to encourage the city continue to move towards to shore up the revenue side of the neighborhood services fund. And then as soon as in next year, perhaps in the next plan, begin to show how to appropriately shore up the revenue side and begin to reinstitute that internal inter-fund payment from the NSF back to the general fund.
So I have a procedural question, incongruity note, page 38 and 39. The procedural question reads in here, the department would like to discuss this with you before the final document is released. I'm not sure what that means and how that plays out. But that paragraph references the need to increase the fees over the coming years to address rising capital costs, including paragraph says that they would like to utilize grant funds to defray costs, and if that doesn't work, apply fund balance as a substitute. So I'm not sure which the direction is. Maybe that's the purpose of having the discussion.
I think we have a list of minor typographical errors, which are not substantive to the document itself. And I think that this one sentence on page 38 would probably fall into that category. And these are things that are not, it's just a note they obviously left in there, which could easily be deleted. So I don't think that changes the decision today of the board, but I'll make a note of it to make sure it gets on our list of.
Okay, well, just reading it on its face looked like you wanted to.
I don't know if it was us or maybe it was. It might have been an internal staff comment. Like we should discuss this before the plan goes. So I'll look into that, but I don't think it's substantive to the plan.
But then I return to the same thing. That first paragraph says we see a need for a fee increase over the next couple of years to address capital costs. The last paragraph says
It's actually included.
right. No, I know that. But then the last paragraph instead says use grant funds to create the equipment and vehicle for capital and vehicle costs, and if not, apply fund balance.
My recollection is that when they spoke to us, they said they expected to get grants to pay for some of the capital equipment that they needed for the neighborhood services fund. Because we were talking about the cost of some of these recycling trucks, which are out of it.
And we've already received the grants from DEP for 2 recycling.
Right.
And there's still additional applications from DEP that we are presenting at the moment.
But there is an incongruity between the first paragraph. It's not clear in the language. It's a little bit of, I think if they had made it clear, it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Grants, fund balance, rate increase, everything's on the table, some combination.
Clearer, and it does address something we raised first time. And I appreciate that.
We'll work with Jeff with.
Yeah, that's okay.
Try to proofreading from project. Or somebody caught it and then.
Yeah, I have little nits, but those are not, once again, I don't think that they change the point. Yeah, but I made a note for our list of notes to fix. I think the major, Madam Chair, the major thing that was, I'm just trying to summarize the comments that came from the board on the neighborhood services fund. It was really the similar comments to the before, as Ralph said, right size the relationships with the other municipalities, the covering the administrative cost, and also the longstanding issue of collecting the receivables in the neighborhood services. So that was sort of the gist of everybody's comments about neighborhood services fund.
And I might add that we have had very good opportunities to make sure that there's no cost sharing for the boroughs with the city. The boroughs are bearing their full cost. And they have sufficient fees in which to do so. So that's been a big
That's right.
relief that we were a little worried at one time because there wasn't a terrific study, but it turns out that the boroughs are actually holding their own and they pay more than their fair share. They pay towards gas, they pay towards recycling bins, things like that. So which as they should, but so the good news is that that is definitely an executed activity. And the second one is that now the Neighborhood Services Fund has a full-time attorney.
Right.
Who is going after the collection, and he also has a lien specialist who's at his disposal, both funded under Neighborhood Services Fund. And that, I didn't bring those numbers with me because it just was a lot
Sure.
of moving parts for today and this week with the budget kicking in.
Yep.
But we have seen substantial improvements in the delinquencies, not necessarily the ancient ones, which at some point may end up, we have to talk to our auditors about how they want to handle those, but because now they're applying the delinquency fee, and despite it not being perfect, and they're collecting the delinquency fee and the penalty, and so that has improved, I wouldn't say significantly, but definitely has kind of righted the ship as having more people pay on time or near on time, and less people paying in that delinquency quadrant.
And the bottom line on that may be that somebody has heard our repeated comments on that. And if somebody or someone in particular, hint, has heard that, that's absolutely wonderful, because that's the direction that I think all of us wanted to go into, was to make sure that these outlying municipalities are not being funded by the taxpayers' accounts.
And they are not, so that has been, and like I said, we've even been able to add additional costs that, we just maybe didn't catch some like new tires or something, and they've been fine with us, as long as it's a legitimate cost, we have legitimate invoices. We haven't had any challenges, it's been a very balanced perspective. And also, Neil Kroger's the one that heard you by making sure he hired those two. One's an attorney and one's secondary, whatever's behind it. Paralegal, sorry. I just drawn it blank for a second. And he has, his other staff is fully, in the general fund is fully complement is full now. So that's, I think, a tribute to Mr. Grover, who has been listening, as well as the administration.
Thank you.
If I could piggyback on Doug's comment, if I recall correctly, Marita, at the last meeting, which reported that the city was working with the assistance of an input firm to help with studying the financial structure of the NSF, assisting with forecasting capital needs and rates and rate study for both for the real contracts and for the cost structure of the fund.
Well, I did have to talk to Mr. West, who's the public works director. I know I have a separate study going on similar, to determine the capital improvement requirements for all facilities and all operations. But he had, I think, an independent study that he was working on, but he hasn't really shared that with me. But you're certainly welcome to reach out to him, or I can reach out to him for you.
Yeah, it was mentioned to us, and I think the most recent mention is actually from our colleague Dan Hartman. He mentioned the name of the firm that he's looking to retain in order to help study that. And I think it's important. I think it touches on some of the comments right now from Doug and Kathy. And I think the rate structure, even for within the city, I mean, as a resident of the city, I love the low trash rates. But as a member of the ICA, I think it's incumbent to point out that when diesel fuel goes up a lot, it's tough to justify underwriting that cost out of the Neighborhood Services Fund when taxpayers are actually not paying a lower tax rate to live in the city. And as we discussed, and as is mentioned in your plan, the tax structure between the services the city provides and the way they collect general fund taxes is really equitable. Whereas the Neighborhood Services Fund, being a utility company, really is set up in order to gather revenues in an equitable way relative to how it delivers performance services. So So that's like trying to say that part of me would love to never see a rate increase in trash, and the ICA board member in me thinks that it's important that the NSF stay in business, because ultimately that will fall back in the general fund. We don't ever want that to happen in any future years beyond the projection of this plan. But it's something that we all care about and want to succeed.
And Doug will tell you, if it's he and I both been in local government, is whenever you have a utility, in this case sanitation, there's always a fee, but then there's a separate fee for capital investment. So I think that's kind of where Dan Hartman's driving it, then it's kind of hard to continue to run a major utility without some type of separate capital investment into that facility. And that's kind of what my study, which actually tomorrow we're doing our final interviews for our applicant, which we had hoped to have done sooner, but that's making plans a nice amendment. But I think that's kind of what Dan's trying to explain, is that when I was a borough manager and I ran the sewer plant, I had to have a fee that a certain percentage went just to capital investment to reinvest into the sewer plant so that it didn't become antiquated and didn't run by. I'm just saying that globally, I'm not making any policy remarks. I'm just saying locally, it just makes sense. And you and I have been doing enough of that, that there needs to be some commitment to capital in that major utility.
I do think that I know there's been some fairly significant reorganization with the Department of Parks and Recreation falling under public works. And so they want to bring Mr. Weston or Austin.
That might be fresh the first week of the year.
I believe the Parks and Recs. I can't quite figure it out because I know that they bring their reports directly to the mayor. So is there still?
They is always reported directly to the mayor. He now manages facilities and buildings.
But not Parks and Rec.
That's correct.
And so this period, whether that disappeared and then how it fits into these numbers.
So I have
You know,
the
what are the efficiencies? I was saddened to hear that Jessica, remember Jessica came in, she was the vehicle maintenance, and she was all about the numbers.
Yeah.
She's gone. So,
Oh, well.
anyway. Moving on to the economic development plan, we appreciate, we're heeding our advice to take out the plan from the submission because it was still not in final enough form for certainly for us to say that it was going to have a positive impact on the city, because there was no action in it. It was merely statements of aspirations, let's call it. But so we'll look forward to that, and we'll continue to press the need for that, because certainly the assumptions that are made, and if they're going to be successful, we need to have some economic development to bring in more money, to bring in more people, and to make sure that we can keep up with projections. So that's anything else on the economic development?
We're typing the paragraph in there. Referencing the
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
32, you said, Doug?
it's in the, I checked the list, it's all in there.
Oh, it's in the list already? Excellent, okay. I already have a list. I just want to make sure all the typos are on the typo list. Okay, good, thank you.
And then, the next stuff that is the incorporation of the timelines for Act 47 years establishment of the Electric Trust, which we know has to happen before the exit Act 47. But personally, I really would encourage intense discussions on the city, because you need, as Marita will attest, she needs access to borrow. And it is not going to happen when the city is out of Act 47. And so I really think that in serious conversations, I think fit as a body that we would need to talk to and look over to get a sense of what's the push pull? Why isn't it moving forward, and what concessions would need to be made in order to move forward? What would make sense?
That portion of the report, in my estimation, we can still use a bit of fine tuning, because there's still that ambiguity between whether or not the trust is established and whether or not the trust is operational.
The trust is not established.
And the new report does say that the liability is such that the city does not believe it can pay for the OPEB costs within a 60-year time frame.
Right, but is it, we were told at one point, and this was, I believe, even pre-Marita sitting with us as exhibition on the board, that the trust had been established as a document, but that the board had not yet been approved as a thing. That to me is different, and I think it needs to be fine-tuned. I dislike the entire reliance. It's not entirely the way it's set up in there, but the majority reliance on the pay-as-you-go.
That's what it is.
I don't want people in the city to be dealing with that for the next 60 years. And that to me is still scary, and the document is saying, but that's what all the other municipalities are doing. And frankly, I don't think that's a good enough explanation. Even if it's absolutely true, I don't think it's a good explanation.
I think that the issue that, as was just described, is that it's a requirement of the act that the trust be established to exit Act 47. And so whether or not the ICA believes that the establishment of the trust is good public policy or not, it's been mandated. And therefore, if the city wants to exit Act 47, which it clearly does, it needs to check that box, or it needs to change the rules of the law, one or the other. Otherwise, it's in a pickle. So I agree with you that that's the status, but I think we should get lost on whether it's a good idea to have the trust or not. It's a requirement.
But it's also required out there.
Strong plan. It's in there. So it's good. It's gonna be hard to avoid that requirement, that mandate.
When I was the recovery coordinator from 17 to 21, July 21st to 21, and early on into my tenure after Fred retired, I still had legal staff at my disposal. So I did have a professional legal staff develop the trust documents and shared them with the city, but that doesn't mean the city prepared them. But I just went to that extra effort since it was a step in the strong plan to develop it and to share it with the city legal department.
But it's your understanding, Marita, that it has not been adopted yet by the city. I presume the city has to adopt it.
City council adopted the wish to begin to execute it and to begin to have it formulated. But that was as far as it went. And that happened in December of 2020.
The answer is
I might hop in here.
No trust.
It's not yet established.
Well, that's what I
or
was.
operational.
Well, it's a question of fact that we have to, I think, answer, but it's one thing to create a trust, it's another thing to fund a trust.
Well, we definitely can.
And so I think
But the trust has funding from the strong.
There's a bank account, right? A plug in with 3 point sitting to put into the trust once the trust is fully established. So it has some funds, 3.3 million.
well, there are some funds that are earmarked, but it might not be in the trust.
They are not, because I don't believe the trust is legally established.
No, it is not.
So it's just sitting in a bank account waiting to be placed into
So
the
the
trust.
action by city council was just to say.
I mean, it's I think it's a legal department question
I
at this point.
think that's another piece that we need to deal about, because I remember when we forwarded the trust wording to Kim.
Right.
And he wanted to continue reviewing it, so.
Yeah, because I think Dave was the director, I think he was board chair at the time.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to remind people that we did the town's. The best we can every time that.
And Mike, I will mention a law that I know not a lot about. But there is now a federal corporate transparency act that triggers, and it applies to trust, as I understand it. If the trust has to be formed by action with the State Department of State. Otherwise, it does not, but it requires an annual filing requirement.
Yeah.
Somebody should be in the know, should be looking at that to determine whether or not that applies to this OFEB trust and whether or not anything else has to be done, because that requires a, as I understand it, disclosure of beneficial owners and all sorts of things that I hope you understand, because it's outside of my wheelhouse.
Well, it's something that we'll brush up on and make sure that the city is complying with that. But we have folks in my office who are trust attorneys who I can tap into.
And then if there's a change in that information that's filed, that eventually goes to the IRS, then they have to file, I think it's within 30 days, information on the change. So somebody needs really to be on top of this to say whether it's doesn't apply to us at all because of the terms in the federal law, or it does apply to us. But it's certainly not something you want to miss filings on if the filings are required.
I will take a look at that.
Okay,
Thank you.
and I have slides that have been shared with me. If you would like those, I'd be more than happy to share.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Technical question, the actuarial analysis on the 60-year tail. Was that done after the contract?
It gets done every 2 years.
Okay, so has it included the contracts that now say new hires are not going to have benefits?
Yeah, it should have the appropriate language in it for the new hires. I mean, I don't have the language in front of me, but I would suspect it does.
They took that into account, they're still probably 16,000.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it's in
There was there was a lively discussion with the auditors about the OPEB liability as well at their meeting.
And again, we can't borrow until we've gotten out of Act 47. That's a big deal.
They can't. As of today, they're not at that 47. So
other issues, Broad Street Market being one,
I brought the Broad Street Market up because to me, the Broad Street Market is a uniter in the city. It's the place where you can go and you can see people of all kinds of socioeconomic backgrounds, all kinds of ethnic backgrounds, all kinds of racial backgrounds, all generally with a smile on their face, because it's a good place to go. It's a partial answer to the food desert, which is one of those created terms in my estimation, but it's a big deal for people looking at the city. And I have real trouble believing that in the short time since the fire, that the city isn't even talking about it. Now, I know the city is behind the scenes doing things, but we need to be talking about it too, because it's a big deal.
big deal.
I do know that Dan Hartman meets with Steve and other members every Saturday.
And the temporary structure has been aggressively.
Aggressively with like cinder block and concrete now and everything. It's gonna be around for a while.
It could take years.
Pitched in. Then other groups, unions have pitched in to provide free service, but.
Which is great, but all those people that were burned out have lost this summer.
They did.
And I grew up in an area where you made your money in the summer or you didn't basically have money all winter. And I suspect that's true for a lot of those people, particularly the vendors with the produce and such.
It is very critical though that they carry very substantial insurance in order to open there. So at least from that perspective, they should have have some protection from the.
Although a lot of those people, I believe to be either Amish or Mennonite, and as far as I know, they do not have insurance.
I'm sure they,
They can't move into the building
I'm
without.
sure they have a workaround.
Work around it.
They, you simply cannot move into the building without the substantial.
They're like subcontractors of an entity.
Yeah, that's possible as well, but it's just, to me, it's a big deal because it's such a place to go. It's a destination in Harrisburg, and you have so many state workers that are going there for meals during the week as well. The meals, it seems to me, you could still do in the front market, but that back market is a mainstay for people to plan meals in Harrisburg. And it's a fun place because it is such a
Sure.
unique place.
I agree. It's definitely an important priority. Should be noted.
So even if it's something to say that we're, behind the scenes working feverishly on this sort of thing, I just think it needs to be in there.
Maybe we can even ask the board to do a follow-up article. Where in the
You saw
world?
the article this week with the cartoon where they showed where the city was being so responsible by building. Yeah.
Oh, there's what I had the idea.
Worked so hard to do the temporary structure before the holidays. Of course, we wanted it done sooner, but there's certain federal and state and requirements that safety and security of everyone, and the
Sure.
restrooms and the building and everything.
But that shouldn't be a secret, Marita. That's big stuff to have out there.
Well, I mean, it was pretty well covered in yesterday's bird.
But yesterday's bird is not the 5-year plan,
Oh, true.
and it's not mentioned in the 5.
Well, maybe next year's.
When Jeffrey mentioned another document that we'll share, and it does point out some of the errors that were missed in cleaning up and perhaps some other errors that were found. But I think there'll also be some sharing about continuing to look at assumptions and trying to make sure that they're consistent and that they are manageable as well. And so we'll share that with you offline. So that the document stands it is, and I don't think I said it at the beginning, we really appreciate the work that went into. It's never, yeah, from the beginning to this document, Rita and I met, and we agreed that in the future that I would meet with her before the submission as well, just to sort of give my ignorant reactions to, what's this? Because as we all know, the closer you get to something, the more likely you are not to see the most obvious thing in the document.
And I hope the city doesn't take from the comments that we've made, the feeling that we're just being critical, because the difference between the original submission and the revised, I guess, new submission, is significant. And I thank someone for having done that. I just think there are still a few things that need attention.
Well, I mean, there's so much good news in this when we look at how the EIT and LSD dollars have continued to rise and become even a greater portion of the budget. And at least we know that the EIT is forever. LST will take 2/3 of the chunk away at some point. But that's another piece as we look at this, just to see that. I mean, other cities aren't as, there's only one other city that's as lucky as we are with those additional taxes. And I think we need to continue to be grateful that the legislature allowed this city to take advantage of that, because every other third-class city would love to be in our boat.
I did speak to Joe Lazaro today from the Keystone Collection, Tech Collection. And he is willing to come to talk to this body and others. Now, he does need a environment where they can come electronically because they're in Erwin and he makes enough trips out here. But I think they can give us even greater input into the consistency and the expectations and the economic development structure and standards that they use to project for this city and for all the cities in Dauphin County and all the counties they represent. So they have a very sophisticated economic development team that's willing to share that data with you if you'd like to, you know, have that as part of one of your meetings or even a special meeting. But Joe is, he's an attorney. The firm has been in existence for a very long time. They originated out of Western Pennsylvania. I think their first client was Duquesne, or no, it was McKeesport. So they're kind of the best and the brightest in terms of the tax collection system for earned income tax and local services tax. And they have extensive information that I just do not have access to. When I worked for the Commonwealth and I did the revenue projections there, we had a professional firm, WeFo, which is a Wharton Business School, to provide us statistical economic data. But in the small city, I just don't have the access to that like he does. So he's offered to do that. He's willing to do that. His only request was, could he do it remote?
That seems like it would be a great idea, and I think it was Ralph that brought it up before, the fact that we understand that these assumptions are going to change. I mean, the stuff I've been reading in the past couple of weeks out of good sources. I mean, one article says that we're headed for a recession, and the article the next day says, no, we're not. So I mean, good luck creating any assumptions when you've got that much division on what's actually going to happen.
But Joe is his team are excellent. I went out to Irwin this summer because I'm on the executive committee for the Dauphin County Tax Collection Committee. And I went out this summer and I went out last summer and I viewed their IT, I viewed their audit, their single audit that they do. They do a SOC audit. So they're very, very sophisticated, and they use Boyer and Ritter, who's across the river. And so I think you'll be pleased with the input he can provide. I think it's just another level of information that might be useful to kind of reaffirm that we don't think we were too aggressive on some of those numbers, but you just never. So we tried it in reference and respect to the controller and so forth. We did the best we could to be as honest and upfront and accurate as possible. But I think Mr. Lazzaro and his team could provide another layer that will be helpful to this board. If you don't mind me suggesting.
Yep, so we got Neil and Keystone. And then, anything else for the good of the order? And as I mentioned, we'll get these corrections to Marita, and I might suggest that if there are some of these bigger issues that we've talked about today, that if they can't be incorporated quickly, that perhaps we as a board would accept independent memos that address each of those things with the assumption that it becomes part and parcel of this document. That's it. So we're at the point now where if someone would want to propose a motion of approval or disapproval, we can entertain them.
I'll be happy to make a motion to approve the plan with a few conditions. First being that that clerical non-substantive items can be cleaned up, and I believe you've taken the lead in compiling those, Audrey. And second being that when we send the approval, we can just send a comment letter incorporating overall critiques, suggestions, compliments as we see the plan.
And that we would adopt supplemental memos as a tendency, or ask them to adopt supplemental memos as appendices to the plan. If anything needs to be addressed that way.
I'll defer to you how you'd like to handle that, whether you wanted to put appendix to the plan or whether you would simply like to have supplemental reports. Either way, I think for the purposes of approving the plan, I think either way is probably fine. I think we've done it in the past before where we've approved it with the condition that supplemental reports would be provided subsequently, just up to date on how some of these really live issues play out in the short term. Broad market being a great example of a very live issue.
So if we incorporate supplemental information, we can sort of tread that tightrope. as
Either
it
way.
comes in.
I'm good with that.
Okay, then I'll let my motion
Stand, all
offer it
right,
like that.
so we have a motion and second,
Second,
all those in favor?
I,
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Madam Chair, I believe that Mr. Barton is going to assist me on the correspondence.
Yes, he is.
Did he know that?
So,
I have a draft for you to start with.
as you know, we must convey this via mail to the mayor. So I'd like to ask for an additional motion
Okay.
to empower Jeffrey to work with members of the board on a letter of transmittal. So we've got it. If we have a motion and if Ralph wants to do that, that will imply consent, he's gonna do it.
I'll be happy to make a motion.
Okay, you have other, I just, yeah. So you obviously.
Motion to
Kathy,
authorize Jeffrey, with the assistance of members of the board, to transmit the required correspondence to the city and the mayor.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. So Jeffrey, now I turn it over to you.
Okay, well, where I am, I'm from civil disorder. We have a number of items to discuss today related to authority business now that we're done discussing city business. The first of which is adoption of our authority 2023-2024 operating budget, which a copy was sent to you, and I will let you in on a secret. It's the exact same budget that we adopted for the previous fiscal year with no changes. But as is required under our organization, if we can have a motion, a second, and adoption of the 2023-2024 operating budget for the ICA, we could move on with that issue.
Second,
second,
any other discussion? All those in favor, aye.
I,
Opposed? Motion carries.
Excellent, and we will publish that on our website as we always do, and provide it to the state in our annual report as we always do. Second bit of issue on that is the time has come to issue our request for remittance from DCED. I will be penning that and sending the ICA request to the Department of Community and Economic Development. Ex officio member Wood has told me that he believes it should be forthcoming in a reasonable period of time, and he's usually the one who knows these things, so. Ms. Clay is in the audience. I will let you know that now that Bev is retired, I will send you the official correspondence and you can feed it through whatever DCED organization you have. And if you need something from me, I will obviously be there to help process the request for funding. Thank you very much. We very much appreciate our partnership with the Department of Community and Economic Development. The next thing on the authority manager's agenda is the meeting schedule for 2024. It is subject to change. Unfortunately, there's a number of conflicts in the 2024 calendar, more than usual. So I have proposed an interim calendar, which I sent to you all. In this calendar, there are two dates that are the third Wednesday instead of the fourth as usual, which is November and December of next year. But there's an additional 3 dates where your authority manager would be probably unavailable. Of course, things are subject to change. So I would ask your latitude as we go through 2024, and that if possible, we consider how we might accomplish those meetings, either moving them to an alternate Wednesday or skipping that month, or whatever works in the best interest of the board, obviously. I would just ask your flexibility next year. It's an unusually conflictual calendar year for your authority manager, but I'm sure we could work it out together. And in light of that, if you could.
That's a new word.
Conflictual.
Dan said I've never heard it,
Conflictual? I don't, sounds right to me. I might have made it up.
because that could be conflictual.
Conflictual, that's a different, yeah. Well, you generally, your vocabulary is better than I, Madam Chair. So,
We will look at it.
But I do need you to, once again, by motion second and approval, adopt this as the official calendar for 2024.
Should I have a motion to approve the calendar as presented? Second? All those conversation, if not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried.
Okay, and our last and regular business item, we have the paid bills for the month of October. Just to let you know, we're starting with a balance of $119,174, and we're finishing October with a balance of $113,169, which obviously is enough to continue the work of the authority. And our interest earnings to date by our limited investment policy is $22.43. Thank you, FNB Bank. And that is all I have, Madam Chair.
Any other questions for Jeffrey? Then I will turn it back over to you as we give the opportunity for public.
Okay, we have
Sorry.
other business, yes.
Okay, now.
Okay.
Sorry.
Trying to keep to that agenda.
Yeah.
So with that, we have two people in the audience, nothing from DCD. I'm getting the signal. And Brian, I don't know if you have any questions today? Excellent. Thank you very much. I hope everybody was okay with the new classroom, a slightly different arrangement, but thank you to Temple University for their continued hosting at no charge to the ICA, which is the right price. So we very much appreciate their cooperation, and I'm sure if it's okay with you, they're going to continue using this room because there's now a class in the other classroom. So as in-person education has returned to Temple University. So that is all, Madam Chair.
Perfect, thank you. If there's nothing else, I entertain a motion to adjourn. Great, we're off.
Okay,
No one did-
4:53 p.m.